All right, we're going to be talking about Chapter 8 here, television, cable, and mobile video. And we're going to really be focusing on three different things with it. We're going to be talking about the history of it. We're going to be talking about ratings and programming. And we will talk a little bit about how present day has kind of changed things. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you an overview on some things. I think there are some good things here for you to explore on your own a little bit later. I'll probably reference some videos that are out there that you can check. And don't forget, as always, you can check out the mass communication textbook if you would like for the full chapter on this, if this is a field you are interested in learning more about. Honestly, with some of the stuff that is here in this chapter, it's probably things that you've covered at different times in maybe a history or another mass media class that you've had. And so you'll be able to pull some of that stuff into this from your own knowledge base as well. Okay, so let's get right into it. So when we talk about television, it really does start back in the 1800s, and it's 1884, and it's Paul Nipkow developed this Nipkow disc. Now, there is a video that I will share that does go through everything from that initial Nipkow disc that was there to the really evolution of TV to where we're at with them today. I think you'll find it pretty interesting what the old ones looked like. Some of them that were there at the World's Fair in the 1930s that were selling were like $200, and they were 5-inch screens, and the big ones, right, for $600 were a whopping 12-inch screens. So those will be interesting for you just to kind of see those things and how they've evolved over time. You think about $600 for a 12-inch screen, and that was black and white and definitely not high def, and you can go online and see what kind of TV you can get for $600 these days. There were a lot of people, though, that ended up building off of that Nipkow disc and getting it to TV that we see in our current form. It was really in the 1920s. Things started moving a lot more quickly, and then it got into the 1930s, and we saw a lot more change as well coming to televisions. World War II, there was a little bit of a pause there, obviously with production of things and any development of things. But by the early 1950s, there were TV stations and TVs in homes around the country. By 1959, we see there are, more than 550 stations, and 90% of all U.S. households had televisions. And you can see here some of the different programming that there was at the time. And one of the biggest companies to bring televisions into people's homes, right, with coax cable and microwave relay network was AT&T, who was able to make that happen. RCA was a big company that worked to help make those early televisions, and AT&T worked to bring them into people's homes. Now, in terms of programming, the textbook talked about 4 big things that really did shape and change television and how it was viewed, right? And that was the quiz show scandal. It might be something that you do want to check out, the quiz show scandal. At the time, quiz shows were sponsored by companies and sponsors, and there was in 1959 a quiz show scandal where producers and advertisers were fixing the games for their desired outcomes, and that really did change how those things were done. Really interesting read on I Love Lucy and that show, and what Lucille Ball did to transform the television industry and how shows were put together and done with that. You probably studied in history McCarthyism and his Red Scare and the growing power of television with Edward R. Murrow. Again, something that is probably could take in and of itself its own presentation as well, just talking about what went on there. And then the fourth big thing there was the Nielsen ratings and what that is. And what the Nielsen ratings are is it's a rating system that is used to show how many people are watching a show at any given time. I don't know about you and your family. Maybe you've actually had a Nielsen's rating box in your house. We almost did at one point, right? I got, I don't know, called by them, messaged by them, something to talk about having one of the Nielsen rating boxes in our house. And I almost pulled the trigger to do it. I think at the time it was just a little more work than I wanted to have done. But basically, for the Nielsen ratings, they do get a sampling of who is watching what shows and what the age range demographics are. And that's how they end up giving like what the most watched shows and games were in any given night and any given week and during any given time frame. And so they do have, they've got a whole host of different numbers for those ratings. It's not just one rating. The C3 and C7 deals with not just like when does a show air, what is the rating, but 3 days later and 7 days later, what do those ratings still look like? And a lot of times that now is from people who DVR shows, people who record them and watch them later, and things like that. They also, advertisers and show producers also want to know like total viewer impressions that they have. And then they've got this whole big rating for what the shares are. And so a rating is households tuned into a given program and all households with a television. Share is households tuned into a program and all households tuned into television at that time. And so the difference there that you see with if they're talking and you're hearing that television jargon with rating and share, the rating number is generally going to be lower. So the rating is how many TVs were tuning in to the show at a given time of all televisions that are out there. And the share is more of, well, with how many TVs and how many households were actually watching television at the time, well, then how many people were watching this show? And so what you find is that shows get a bit of a bump on the share rather than the rating. Might be all confusing. Feel free to pause that and you'll see what it is. But they are two different numbers, the rating and the share. There's a lot of other interesting things too. Like there's another video I'll link to and share with you all on how there was this 14-year-old farm boy, right, who was like really walking out in his farm and saw the rows of dirt that was in the ground and had this vision for the modern day technology that was there. And also in 1948, there were places all over the country, right? But this was in Pennsylvania where there was not real great reception. And this appliance salesman began wiring homes around town with a tower to be able to increase sales of TVs that he had so that homes in town could actually watch things if they bought the TV. And so really interesting stuff there. And just really, this was not just one person or one company or one thing, just as, really with anything that brought about the evolution of an entire medium, but a lot of different people and companies that did that. Congress and the government have a lot of legislation that does end up governing television and what can go on there. The Public Broadcasting Act of 1967 united education channels into what we now know as PBS. And there is in the chapter this whole big interesting thing on the Public Broadcasting Network and specifically the creation of Sesame Street, right? And in 1968, a public affairs program producer for Channel 13 in New York City identified a number of related problems that she believed could be addressed by a well-conceived, well-produced television show. Joan Cooney saw that 80% of 3- and 4-year-olds and 25% of 5-year-olds in the United States didn't attend any form of preschool. Children from financially disadvantaged homes were far less likely to attend preschool than these ages of their better-off peers. Children in these age groups who didn't go to preschool received little education, little academic instruction, and preschool was the equivalent of organized recess. Large numbers of U.S. children then entered first grade with no formal schooling. So what did these children do instead of going to preschool? Well, Cooney knew that they watched television. And her idea was to use an interesting, exciting, visually and orally stimulating television show as an explicitly educational tool to promote the intellectual and cultural growth of preschoolers, particularly disadvantaged preschoolers, and to teach children how to think as well as what to think. Cooney established a nonprofit organization, the Children's Television Workshop. And she worked to get funding from everyone from Carnegie and Ford and public broadcasters to contribute $13.7 million for CTW's first 4 years. They did a lot of studying and best instructional methods for teaching preschoolers, and CTW unveiled Sesame Street during the 1969 television season. Sesame Street obviously went on to air 35 new episodes a year, 50 years after its debut, and in 2016, it made HBO its new home network. Several national studies demonstrated that academic performance in early grades was directly and strongly correlated with regular viewing of Sesame Street. There are now just over 120 million television households in the United States, and 96% of all homes have televisions. Now, ads is another crucial thing with the audience, obviously. Total annual billings for television ads are around $68 million. The average 30-second primetime network television spot costs well over $100,000. And a spot on Sunday Night Football gets more than $600,000. Super Bowl commercials cost well over $5 million for advertisers to run 30 seconds, or more than $160,000 per second. Super Bowls have earned more than $5.4 billion in ads for the networks that have carried them. Now, it's not every show that gets on the air. Between 60 and 70 trial programs or pilots are annually produced, and that's out of about 4,000 proposals that there are every year for new TV series. 20 to 30 of those trials will actually make it to the screen. And networks prefer to work with producers and organizations that offer financial stability. The big thing with this is, would you rather work with a producer and an organization that has a track record of making something that has gone well before, or do you want to work with someone who is unproven? And while there might be a lot of benefits to working with someone new and unproven, it's much more of a gamble than working with somebody who has already done it before and who has a track record. Interesting graph, and I don't know how many of these that you have ever watched even one episode of, but I thought I'd just leave this in here. But the most watched non-sports programs in the history, the most watched ever was MASH's final episode in 1983, and there was a evening drama series called Dallas that had a Who Shot JR episode in 1980 that was the second most watched one that was out there. We end up getting into premium channels like HBO and Showtime, and that started in the 1970s. You can look for more history on those things. I think the big thing to note when HBO and other players came in was that premium cable eroded the broadcasters' profits. The main ABC, NBC, and CBS, they started taking chunks of shares. You think about, somebody just like HBO coming in that was offered by satellite only at the time, and you end up looking at 40 years later and what's come to be with all of the other channels that we'll be talking about shortly, like Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and all the other players. This was just the tip of the iceberg at the time. As of 2020, these were the top 10 paid TV services, ranked in subscribers in millions. And you see on here, a lot of these are cable companies, but 4 of them are, and really it's the top 4 are not media companies like DirecTV or Comcast or Dish, but they are your Netflixes, Amazon Prime, Hulu, and Disney. Now, obviously, bringing things in 1976, the VCR also did change things. This was shortly after HBO was introduced. The VCR, for the first time, allowed people to not have to watch things in real time. They could record things. They could watch it later. They could time shift, right? They didn't have to watch the program on Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. And they could zip through commercials as well. When DVDs came into play as well, the big thing there was that people could, for the first time, pause and rewind and see different frames in high def. It also allowed DVDs. The nice thing about those was they could have different languages on there as well as bonus features like deleted scenes and things like that. Another big technological advance with television was having the DVR playbacks to boost ratings. Nielsen ended up having those added into their ratings a while later, and it is just another big advance in the television time frame. The biggest thing really with streaming video was internet had to be able to support it. And in the early days of the internet, supporting video, like long movies and television shows, just was not real popular. Not because people didn't want it, it's just because the bandwidth was not that good. And so what you ended up having was, in the early days, a lot of it was trailers to movies and things like that. And as internet got better and faster, that ushered in more long-form videos with everything, not only from YouTube, but the streaming services as well. And that's going to about do it for things. I am going to link a couple different videos into the notes that we give you guys if you want to see a little bit more about the history of television and news. And likewise, and as always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate asking one of us, and we'll be glad to help.